Fernando. On behalf of the Department of English, Department of Political Science, Internal Quality Assurance Cell, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the second session of this today international seminar, Post-Covid-19, Environmentalism, Possible Futures. Yes, definitely COVID-19 takes a lot from us, but at the same time, it teaches us a lot about ourselves. It teaches us what is right, what is wrong. What should we do, what should we not? What role should the policymakers play? What did they do at the end of the day? Yes, difficult questions, difficult answers. Whenever the world is in crisis, the philosophers have played a very crucial role in order to change the world by questioning the unquestioned, by deconstructing the construction. And that's why today we have with us an eminent philosopher, Dr. Francisco Fernando from the Department of Philosophy, New York University. Now I would like to shift this space, virtual space, to Jayanto Kumar Naik for introducing our guest, Dr. Fernando. Over to you, Jayanto da. Jayanto da, can you hear me?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are perfectly audible. Please,
Okay.
please introduce.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Bapin Mollik, for handing over to me. Myself, Jayanto Kumar Naik, the librarian of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College. It is my honor to welcome Dr. Fernando. So, good morning, ma'am. Dr. Francisco Fernando is a leading voice in the field of post-human studies. Dr. Fernando teaches philosophy at New York University, US, as an adjunct assistant professor. She is the author of several publications, and her latest book is Philosophical Posthumanism, published by Bloomsbury Publishers in the year 2019. Dr. Fernando was the recipient of Philosophical Prize, Premio Danati, with the acknowledgement of the President of Italian Republic. Dr. Fernando earned a PhD in philosophy from University of Roma, Italy, to which the European Doctoral Fellowship was granted. She also holds an MA in Gender Studies from Utrecht University, Holland, presently in Netherlands. Dr. Fernando was a visiting scholar at Columbia University, US, twice, as an independent researcher at the University of Reading, England, working on cyborg theory with Professor Kevin Warwick. Dr. Fernando is the founder of the Global Posthuman Network, and in the history of TED Talks, he was the first speaker to give a talk on the subject of the posthuman. So, I'm finished now, and this biography of Dr. Francisco Fernando. So, I would like to tell you one thing. This session is not like that. Dr. Fernando only speak. Our convener, Mr. Bapin Mollik, will talk to Francisco Fernando, and there is a question and session round. Okay. So after finishing the question and session with Bapin Mollik, and the floor is open for you all to question him. Okay. So I request Mr. Bapin Mollik to ask a question to Francisco Fernando, and I am handing over to you.
Thank you, Jayanto da. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes.
So we are very happy to have you among us, ma'am. And the first question that I have for you, that is, are we already post-human, or have human always been post-human? What do you think about this?
Well, first of all, I would like to say hi to everyone. It's a great honor and a joy to be here together in this very unique historical moment. I would like to, first of all, thank so much Professor Bapin Malik for organizing this, Professor Jayanta Nayak for the beautiful introduction, the University of Kalyani, and the College of Ambedkar. This is really a unique opportunity to reflect together about our human condition. So thank you so much for your question, Bapin. It's definitely a very crucial one. There are many different answers that can be given to your question. So are we already post-human? Have we ever been human? There are different philosophical movements at the moment, and they are giving different answers. I'm going to give you my answer, which comes from a specific tradition, which is the tradition of philosophical posthumanism, which is rooted in the tradition of postmodernism, and a type of philosophy that is really connected to the now, to who we are, to our embodiments, to our presence. In this sense, my answer to your question would be yes, we can already be posthuman now, but the condition of being posthuman is entangled with our own enacting and manifesting in this world, which means that the way we exist could be posthuman. For instance, by addressing existence in post-humanist, post-anthropocentrist, and post-dualistic ways. What do I mean by that? I mean the fact that being posthuman from a posthumanist perspective means acknowledging the fact that we are not an autonomous beings, that we are not in an absolute separation from others. It means to acknowledge that we are constantly connecting and flourishing and developing through others to the point that we actually exist because of otherness. We come to this dimension because, for instance, of our parents, and we can survive through breathing the air and eating the food and drinking water, etc., etc. So in this sense, posthumanism, it's really a gift because it has allowed us to access existence from a way that is deeply rooted in the condition of the now, which means also acknowledging, for instance, our inextricability with, for instance, the oikos, the ecology, the biosphere, and also on some level with technology. So going back to your question, my answer would be yes, we can be posthuman right now in the way we manifest, in the way we exist. Now, other movements are going to give you different answers. An answer, for instance, from the movement of transhumanism that I'm not affiliated with, but I work closely with. I know, all the main transhumanist philosophers, and they do add a lot to the conversation. Although for me, there are many limits to transhumanism. I do not consider myself a transhumanist, but they do add a lot to the reflection about the human condition. Now, for the transhumanist perspective, the answer to your beautiful question would be, we are not posthuman yet. According to transhumanism, to be posthuman, you really need to be evolving in a way that is kind of going outside of the biological genealogy of the human. So for instance, in the close future, something like uploading your mind on a machine. This machine in which human mind has been uploaded could be considered, for instance, a post-human being. So a being that is connecting to the human history because there is human consciousness that is being uploaded there, but is not human anymore because it's not, for instance, based on a biological body. Another example would be if humans migrate to space, and for instance, if they migrate to Mars, which is a plan for NASA and for many other companies that are talking about humans eventually living on Mars, actually quite soon, between 10 years, people are saying less than that, a little more than that. So in that case, let's say that some humans do migrate to Mars. generation after generation, if they do not come back to Earth anymore, they may evolve in a different way that sustain them very well on Mars, but do not allow them to live, for instance, on Earth anymore. So again, this could be another example of species that are evolutionarily related to the Homo sapiens, to the human as we know it now, but they are not human anymore. For instance, biologically, they could not reproduce with other humans. So going back to your question, Bapin, there are different answers. Some people say, no, we are not post-human yet. This, for instance, would be the case of transhumanism, or I should say transhumanisms, because there are different movements under the umbrella term of transhumanism, although all of them agree in focusing on human enhancement, enhancing the human. On the other side, you have other movements, for instance, posthumanism, and the answer to the question is, time is not linear. We do not have to wait tomorrow to become posthuman. We can be posthuman now in the way we access existence. So again, for instance, from a philosophical posthumanist perspective, this could be done by existing in posthumanist, post-anthropocentric, and post-dualistic ways. And then I would push it more, and from an existential posthumanist perspective, that's my book that I'm writing at the moment, it's a condition that you, as a posthumanist, eventually need to address. How can you be posthuman now? And because the fact that you can doesn't mean that you are being posthuman now. So again, thank you so much for your beautiful question, Bapin. So my personal answer as a philosopher of posthumanism, I would say yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful explanation. In the book, Philosophical Posthumanism by you have mentioned posthumanism is never post-political, but ever transversal and relational. Right. So my question to you is that, how can we contextualize this articulation with the notion of contemporary environmental discourse?
That's a wonderful, wonderful question. So contemporary, so needed, so needed. So I'm going to give you an answer starting, let's say, a step back. And I would like also what I define as politics. Because if we went into the mainstream approach to politics, which has been unfortunately very dualistic in the last centuries, the answer would be posthumanism is not political in that sense. Because once, for instance, I take the example of the United States, there are two major parties and they're always in conflict with each other, and they don't realize that we are here together to try to bring wellness to the human condition and beyond. So if you think in that way, the fact that you're just fighting someone because they are Democrat or Republican doesn't even make sense. So in that sense, I would say that kind of politics is completely outdated from a posthumanist perspective, because you are playing into a dualistic field that really doesn't bring much positive outcomes to neither to the human condition or to non-humans, but it becomes a game of power. Now, I'd like to access posthumanism as a political approach, absolutely, but from a wider perspective. In these, many traditions can help. I can bring some examples here. One side, I can mention feminism. On the other side, also the Indian tradition, for instance, the Upanishads. Let me bring some of these sources that are so different in time and why they are telling us something very similar. Or also, of course, other traditions, postmodernism, Foucault, etc., etc. So in this sense, I address politics. Let's, for instance, bring feminism to the idea that the personal is political. The experience that we go through is a political experience because we are part of the polis, not anymore addressing the Greek sense, because if we go to the root of the tradition of politics and we look at the Greek tradition, the polis in ancient Greek means a city. The polis was a very small, limited community of people who had property, of people who were citizens of Athens, of people who could vote, So you have to exclude women, you have to exclude slaves, that at the time slavery was part of the picture. Of course, you have to exclude children. You have to exclude people who do not have property. So at the end of the day, this democracy in ancient Greece, in Athens, was a very small group of people. It was really not democratic at all. It's not that included all the voices that were humans at the time. So that kind of politics, it also reflects in the tradition of politics. For instance, the United States, the first time that had a president who was not white was with Obama, never had a female president. It really showed the tradition of a not an inclusive, not a comprehensive tradition of politics in the political arena that we've been witnessing. So for me, that tradition, it is outdated because it doesn't bring much wellness again to the human condition. The human condition is a plural condition. We are many, and it's beautiful. We are many and we're all connected. So it's not an ontological pluralism, neither is an ontological monism. It's a connection of the two. We are one and many. And yes, we can be one and many at the same time. Think of ourselves. Think of ourselves when we were children. And all the dreams we had and what we would like to eat and the friends we had around. And sorry, moving a little the computer because it's having some issues with connection. Just want to make sure that we are staying connected. So it's, let me just open here like this. Hopefully it's getting better. Okay, so we are many and we're constantly changing. So on one side, the personal is political. On the other side, the micro politics, so the politics, the small layers of politics are reflecting the macro politics, the big picture. In this sense, posthumanism is a political approach. And to the point that we realize we need to reconsider politics from a situated approach in the 21st century that fully acknowledges the Anthropocene, fully acknowledges the devastation, fully acknowledges that we are part of the planet and we can no longer think of politics, everything from this perspective. We need to reconsider engineering and architecture and a human existence and survival in relation to the oikos. Oikos, eco, ecology, comes from Greek, means the home we inhabit, and I would go further than that, the home that we are. So in that sense, we can think of bodies, and with biota living in our guts, we are they are a microcosm, we are a macrocosm for them, and the planet is another body within bodies. So we are part of this big body, which is planet Earth, and you can, further on to the cosmos, etc., etc. So the oikos, the eco, has to be part of a political approach in the 21st century for good. We can no longer think of the human in separation. We can no longer think of the human as performing with nature on the background. That's not an option anymore. It's not an option even for our survival, because that's, again, it's really negatively impacting our own life on planet Earth. So thank you so much for the question. Really urgent and really need to rethink everything from this perspective.
Thank you, ma'am. Then I am again quoting from your book, Philosophical Posthumanism. You have mentioned that the importance of post. So why is the prefix post relevant in the discourse of ecology? Or where does the notion of human comes from? Or if I am very specific, of which human is the post-human a post within quote?
Thank you so much, Bapin. That's really an interesting question. All right, so it is a very interesting question because when you look at the history of the human, in many traditions, not all of them, but many traditions, you see at one point a separation. Let's see, for instance, let's go back to the Greeks that are an interesting tradition that has been formative for many other traditions, definitely not just for Western philosophy. Thinking, for instance, also the philosophy of the Middle East, so definitely Greek philosophy had a big impact on human culture. Let's look at that. So if we look at the history of, for instance, Greek culture, we look at one point at a split, big separation between the human, defined as culture, and nature. In this dualism, the two parts of the dualism were not co-creating each other. It was not so much, for instance, like the Tao, the dualistic Tao, in which the yin and yang are constantly forming each other. Water is a metaphor of the Tao. Now, in these other traditions, you have at one point a split, which is become ontological, in the sense that eventually, and that's also how identities start to be created. And I'm saying this because it's deeply related to, for instance, how the human has been constructed, again, in many different traditions. I'm going to bring the Greek tradition, but really this applies to, I would say, most human societies from the Neolithic on. What I'm talking about? I'm talking about when, at one point, human societies started to create an identity, started to form, for instance, cities, nations, urban settlements. And in these, they started to create the notion of the other. Now, we are Indian, we are Italian, we are Greek, and the others are something else. With the Greek, you see this very, very clearly, to the point that if you look at the notion of humanus, human, it's based on the Greek notion. So let's just give a little historical introduction here. So if you look at the etymological history of the term human in English, that comes from Latin, which was the ancient language of Rome, and comes from humanus, humana, humanum. That notion that started to become widespread in the first century of the Common Era was based on a Greek notion, which was the anthropos. That's why today you still have notions like anthropocentrism, anthropocene, anthropology. So anthropos in Greek means human. But if you look at the notion of the anthropos in the Greek tradition, you realize something interesting, that only the people who spoke Greek, only the people who were part of the Greek tradition of the paideia were considered Greek. So in that sense, to be Greek, you were considered, once you were Greek, once you were part of the paideia, once you were educated in the Greek tradition, you were considered human. Egyptians, Phoenicians, Persians were not considered humans, were not considered anthropos. They were considered barbarians. Now, this split between the human as anthropos and the barbarians is something that keeps coming back in the history of our contemporary society. It's very interesting that when you look at the history, for instance, of the war in Iraq, and you look at the narrative that was constructed in the US, the notion of barbarian kept coming back over and over. We are going there, we between the commas, good Americans are going to Iraq, bringing the good notion of democracy and the good between the commas practice of democracy. So this historical habit of looking at someone as the other has been repeated in history over and over and over. And I say history, but I not say stories. What I'm saying here, I'm definitely connecting this to the beginning of civilization. The Paleolithic time is a different era. We should look more into that. I think it's going to bring a lot of gifts about understanding the human, but definitely with the construction of cities, of nations, of strong identities, you add the construction of the notion of the other. These, as posthumans, we really need to work on this. We need to deconstruct this because it has become a habit of the human species that is really not a good habit, that is really affecting a lot of humans, is creating a lot of conflicts, a lot of wars, a lot of misunderstanding, and life is short. Life goes like that. And if we get in the game of dichotomies, in the game of dualities, we are going to die and we're not going to grasp the deeper understanding of existence. So it becomes what they call a social disease. racism and sexism and ethnocentrism, all these dualities become cultural diseases, literally, because they create a mindset that is nefarious to the humankind. So it's serious, it's beautiful. We are here together to re-envision. We are here together to understand what needs to be changed right now. We are part of the human species. We can do it, but we need to see. Because if we have some type of infection going on in our body and we don't do anything about it, we're going to die. If we have an infection, we see the issue, we can address it. So again, posthumanism brings so much relevance and importance to our society. The only way, though, this can bring real changes is by embracing it together, seeing what we need to change, and do it for the sake of wellness, for the sake of existential bliss. Again, life is short. We should have a good life. And to have a good life means to understand it. And to understand it means to be open. And to be open means to be understanding the human condition as a bridge, as an opening, not as a strong, closed identity that places us in separation from others.
Thank you. Thank you once again for your response. The next question that I have for you, ma'am, do you think that the post-human recognition of non-human otherness starts with the recognition of human alternative? What do you think about this?
It's a wonderful question, Bapin, and so urgent, especially in the post-human field. Now, let's address it more clearly because it's a very important question. What happens is that sometimes people get excited about the new exotic difference, the new terms of manifestation that come in the existential condition from era to era, because we're constantly changing, even as a planet. So, for instance, let's bring the example of AI, artificial intelligence. There are many scholars, many people who love AI, who are so excited about artificial intelligence. Of course, others are afraid of that, but it's still the same paradigm. There is a lot of excitement, for instance, about what artificial intelligence is bringing to the human condition and what can bring to the future. Now, of course, this has to be acknowledged. That's why I think that ancient philosophies are precious gifts that people from ancient time gave us, took all their life to think about existence and to transmit this knowledge. In the past used to be done orally and eventually in the written form. So we were always going to be grateful for people who took the time to share their wisdom with the humankind and beyond, because nowadays, for instance, technical beings can access also this kind of wisdom. But is not enough, because existence is constantly evolving. Again, think of us, how we are changing every day. Think of the humans, how look different and live in different ways. Think of planet Earth, how is so different from, for instance, 2,000 years ago. Most forests are gone. We have different kind of species. So everything is constantly changing. Now, if we think from this type of approach, the risk of just embracing the exotic new difference, for instance, technological beings, is that you are jumping into the new other. It can be through love or hate. I say hate because unfortunately there is also a new narrative being constructed about now, about being just afraid of robots and AI, with, for instance, the notion of AI takeover. Now they are the bad ones and we should be afraid. Or the full love, or they are the smart one, they're going to take over and good for them. So for me, as a posthumanist, these are dangerous dichotomies. Because, again, existence is hybrid. It's constantly entangling and emerging and reaccessing its own self. So in this sense, of course, we need to acknowledge the technology is manifesting, is bringing new insights, new perspectives, not only to the whole big picture of existence, of the ontos, from Greek ontos means of being, but to us, to our own self, our way, the way we exist. But that's not enough to be a posthumanist. Or it's not enough just to address, for instance, non-human animals. And there are a lot of people who come, from instance, from a perspective rooted in the acknowledgement of the Anthropocene. So there is a lot of activism also between posthumanists to be, for instance, aware of animal rights or non-human animal personhoods, to relocate the human as a biological animal in the big picture, to deconstruct the hierarchy of the human at the very top and all the other animals lower, and the idea that human could do anything to them. We are really deconstructing that. But again, that's not enough. In order to be posthumanist, from my understanding, which is based on philosophical posthumanism, you really have to embrace these three layers. You have to understand, first of all, that humans are plural, a plural entity. We're all diverse. We need to respect each other. We need to respect human diversity. So it's not enough to embrace the technological others or the non-human animals others when we're not respecting human others. And when we are keeping racist biases inside of us, or sexist biases, ethnocentric biases, biases based on religion, or whatever. We really need to take a step back from all the cultural formations that we have been placed into. We have to take a step back. We have to realize that, again, we are alterity. We are oceans. We are rivers. We are constantly changing. We are manifesting in relation to human others, to non-human others. We need to understand that our perspective is unique, is precious, but it's entangled and is forming through the perspective of all the other existence and beings right now, being here right now with us. So in that sense, human diversity has to be respected. Non-human diversity has also to be respected. And to this, and also other technological diversity has to be respected, because it is a way that the 21st century is manifesting. It's something that we need to acknowledge. It's not enough just going back to Mother Earth, because we are entangled with technology. Some humans need technology to survive. Think of someone with a pacemaker. So that it's not anymore an option just going into the human versus nature dichotomy, or the human is going back to nature. We are nature, but we are also nature culture. We are constantly changing. We are part of a large picture, but every action, every thought, every relation that we engage with has a repercussion. Think, for instance, of ripples in the water. Think of waves in the ocean. So again, locating ourselves in the big picture, not just jumping into respecting the technological alterity or the non-human alterity, respecting alterity because it's a condition of the manifestation of existence.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for this lucid articulation. And again, I am quoting from your book, Philosophical Posthumanism. You said, you have expressed that posthumanism can be considered as second generation of postmodernism, leading the deconstruction of human to its extreme consequences, unquote. So my question to you is that, can the centrality of humans be reconfigured in praxis with thinking only? Or how can we practice our thought in real life?
That's absolutely a wonderful question. I'm actually developing my next book on this. I'm writing it at the moment. Today, the paperback of Philosophical Posthumanism is coming out with Bloomsbury. I'm very happy about that because it has a decent price. It used to be too expensive, and I tried to have Bloomsbury having a normal price, but they would not agree with that. But today, the book is coming out as a paperback. The ebook is $10, so it's affordable. But in the first book, I was accessing, like you said, the philosophical tradition of philosophical posthumanism. And I did locate it, that you're right, in the tradition of postmodernism, because it is a tradition that brings to us the gift of deconstruction. What does it mean? The gift of, and it's not the only tradition, obviously, and I make it clear in the book that you can definitely connect it to many other traditions. But in the specific tradition that, for instance, when we're talking about European tradition and continental philosophy, postmodernism brings a great gift. The gift of unfolding the human as a flower, taking a petal out after the other, and realizing that the core of the human doesn't need all these formation that had been historically constructed around the notion of the human. Because the human itself, again, is an open notion, as we were mentioning that before. Now, when you go on with the deconstruction, just to be, some people do not come from philosophy, it's not a big deal. Deconstruction might sound like an awkward term. Let's clarify this. Let's go back to the 60s and the 70s. Let's go back to the 20th century, and many humans at the time realized that the construction of the notion of the human had been done in ways that were not comprehensive of everyone who could be considered genetically human. But you can bring a lot of examples to this. Again, think, for instance, of the history of sexism, or think of the history of colonialism. That's also a very interesting experience to be rethought from a deconstructive way. Post-colonialism is a wonderful approach that comes out of India, for instance. That's another great example of deconstruction. Once you deconstruct, for instance, the British as the subject and the Indian as the other. That was a great example also of a dichotomy, of a strict dualism, hierarchical, that needed to be deconstructed. And then you had a whole movement doing that, and now you have very wise scholars based in the Indian tradition that are bringing us tools from the post-colonial approach. So again, there are many, many examples you can bring to the idea of deconstruction. So basically, deconstruction means that once you have a strong set of identity, you do not have to take that as granted. You have to be brave enough to ask yourself, is that the way it is? Is that the way it should be or not? And it's as always the case, no strong identities should be embraced as such. You can embrace identity is in a fluctuating way that may suit you in that moment, but never take it too seriously. Okay, you are much more than that. Now, going back to your question, of course, the question is, what are we going to do with all this theory? Is posthumanism or postcolonialism or postmodernism just something that we write as philosophers or as scholars or as historians or as politicians or whatever it is, or is something that is going to change our life? So this is the question that I'm addressing in the book I'm writing at the moment, which is a Posthuman Agency, Social Wisdom for the 21st Century. This is the book. And this is exactly the question that I had to ask myself, especially after COVID-19. After we realized that we may die, not even tomorrow, we may die tonight. The people around us may be dying. Everything is changing. We are realizing we are not immortal. We've never been, but maybe sometimes we forget that we are going to die. That's intense to be acknowledging, but that's a great opening of understanding. We cannot forget we're going to die, because if we do, we are going to be caught into the game of personal Maya, the Maya that we create around us, taking so seriously our jobs or the way we look or our social status. Now, of course, that's all part of the game. Lila, like the Hindu notion of the cosmic game, it is part of the game, but the game is also our existence. So it's also serious. It's a serious game. It's a game that is also our existence. So in that sense, I had to ask myself, once COVID started happening, once I was in the States, my family, I have a lot of family around, and all the human species and beyond is my family, but I also had relatives who were in Italy, who, were at risk of dying of the disease. So I had to ask myself, is this helping me in this situation? Is posthumanism something that is helping me right now to deal with this? And it was serious. It was a serious question. After I did meditate. Didn't just, read more books or write more. I stopped. I really stopped and paused. And I tried to access it through silence. And after stopping, I realized that it did help me a lot, actually. And I realized that posthumanism cannot be, from my understanding, and I don't want to generalize, because some people take posthumanism just as a scholarly tradition that they're writing about, but it doesn't change their lives. It's fine. In my perspective, I never choose philosophy just to have a job. I never choose philosophy just to be a scholar. I don't care about that. I choose philosophy because of the ancient meaning of philosophy. And in this sense, I like the Greek notion of love for wisdom. Philosophia. Philos, love, sophia, wisdom. And of course, this is definitely not just Greek. Think of the Indian tradition, Upanishads. There are many other traditions. But in the Greek term is also the etymology of the English notion of philosophy. So in that sense, posthumanism is a philosophy because it really allows us to be respectful and grateful for any tradition that has come before us. So we should address and acknowledge all of them. But it also allows us to locate ourselves in the 21st century and understanding our condition from the location in which we are at, including the Anthropocene, as we were mentioning before, the human supremacy, which needs to be deconstructed right now, because it's also one of the reasons of COVID-19. Humans thinking that they can do anything to any other animals, killing any other animals, for reasons that are not sustainable. We don't need to kill any other animal. Yes, we need to survive, of course. I'm not an human. I'm not saying that we should just extinct ourselves, because I don't think that that's necessarily good or bad. I think that, it's not that we are necessarily worse species than others, but we really need to be getting rid of all the supremacy, Hindu supremacy or Muslim supremacy or female supremacy or human supremacy. Not good for us to understand who we really are. Because if we understand who we really are, we are not engaged in an identity. There are many forms of engaging ourselves, many different prisons. But one prison is a strong identification in a close identity. That's a way to pass through life without really merging with life. It's a way to be thrown in the ocean like a piece of plastic and being out of the ocean because the ocean doesn't want to. It's cleansing itself. To be part of existence means to really understanding what's happening, being able to merge with the ocean, being a wave. So in that sense, Bapin, you're absolutely right. My answer to your question is yes. The posthumanism is not just something we're writing about. If that's the case, I'm not interested in. But I also want to say that some scholars take it that way, and it's absolutely fine. Everyone is different. And, if that helping them in their existential unfolding, good for them. In my case, I really realized that posthumanism had to help me dealing with my daily existence. How can we do it? It's a big question. It's a personal question, and it's not a universal question. The way posthumanism is giving me insights in my daily existence may be different from you, but we need to really readdress the way we exist through this key of rethinking our existence in posthumanist, that is acknowledging, respecting human diversity, post-anthropocentrism, so really acknowledging how we do with recycling, how we doing with our own diets, how we doing with our houses, how we doing with the clothes we wear. It's interesting, again, in the Indian tradition, thinking, for instance, of Gandhi and his knitting cotton so that he would not buy cotton from England because it was created in locations that were unfair, that were using manufacturers in a way that it was not just to the workers there. That's deep. I think that there is a lot that can be taken, for instance, from the Satyagraha tradition, and really think of the truth from your own perspective, not from a universal way that applies to everyone, but from you. How are you grappling with this notion in your daily existence? And don't be a perfectionist, because if you're going to be perfection, you're going to be very unhappy. So this is not about feeling bad. It's about doing as much as we can, day by day, moment after moment, and constantly working on ourselves. It's not, the goal is the path. The path, it doesn't have an ultimate goal, or now I am the perfect posthuman. That's not the case. The goal is the path of constantly being able to be sincere, honest to yourself, and saying, if I am addressing this philosophy should manifest in the way I exist. Again, doesn't mean to be the perfect posthuman. There is no such thing, and there is not one answer. But yes, as an existential posthumanism should really help you navigate each stage of your life, each moment of your life, from very practical questions like, again, what food are you eating? How are you treating others? And how are you treating yourself?
Thank you, ma'am, once again for your explanation. And the next question that I have for you, do you think that the anthropocentric choice of privileging bios instead of zoo exposes the exclusivist domain of life itself? What do you think about this?
Thank you so much, Bapin. It's a very good question. Let me just clarify a little bit for the people who do not come from a specific philosophical tradition, what is Zoe and what is bios. So in the history of, for instance, Western science and Western philosophy, the notion of bios, think for instance of biology. Some of you may be part of the departments of biology, for instance, at Kalyani University. So biology, bios, come again from Greek. Ancient Greece definitely had a huge impact, as I said, in many traditions, definitely also in the Western one. Now, biology, for instance, is the logos, is the discourse on bios. Bios in ancient Greek meant life, but, and that's where we have Rosi Bredotti enlightening us, and also Giorgio Gamben enlightening us on this notion. The notion of the bios in ancient Greece did not apply to everyone, was specifically human life. Was specifically life that has been cultured, life that was part of a specific culture. Going back to the anthropos, this culture was paideia, which simply means education, but of course educated in the Greek way, because of course the Persians also had a wonderful way to educate their children. Forget about Egyptians and all of the other groups of societies at the time. But again, paideia was the Greek way of education for Greek people. That was considered the plus. Now, bios, in this sense, refer to the human condition, did not apply to non-human life. Non-human life was defined in ancient Greek as zoe, Z-O-E, zoe. For instance, think of the zoo in modern English. The zoo is a place where non-human others are kept, or zoology, the study of non-human animals. So in that sense, in ancient Greek, there was a split. It was hierarchical. It was not just a dualism. It was a rigid hierarchical dualism, which I like to define as dichotomy, between bios, which is human life, and zoe, which means non-human life, nature, as wild, as barbarian, as untamed, the minus, bios, the plus. So, Bapin, you're absolutely right. This is something that has been part of the taking for granted of many societies, and that we are the life that has been evolved in the most intelligent ways. There are unlimited documentaries about defining the Homo sapiens as the most intelligent ones. Even, for instance, in some tradition, even, for instance, Buddhist and Hindu tradition, the idea if you reincarnate or if you're rebirthing as a human is considered a plus, because it's considered very good in the evolutionary tradition of the soul. Now you're a human, you did good. Stay here, because that's going to be good for you to eventually reach enlightenment, moksha. Now, this is why I think that ancient tradition brings so much wisdom, but also we need to reconsider some of these approaches from a perspective located in the now. I think that rebirthing or reincarnation are interesting tradition that may bring a lot of insights, but personally, I do not think that, for instance, a human reincarnation or a human rebirth is necessarily a plus. I think as a species, we are doing a lot of wrong to human, to Earth, for instance. And maybe from a non-human perspective, I remember watching this video of the Amazon forest being burned by humans to create, to cut down the trees and to create pastures for cows to be killed and to be made meat for McDonald's and to be sold around the world. Now, in this video, which was brutal, you would see hundreds of thousands of living in the forest, and eventually there was nothing left, just a lot of smoke and some snakes, you know, like trying to wander in those brutal experience that they had witnessed, and they were survival. Now, from a non-human perspective, and also from a human perspective, a human that realizes that we cannot just do anything we want, that we cannot just cut down the Amazon forest to have, you know, cows to be eaten by other humans who don't actually need them, because actually eating too much meat is actually not good for you, and you don't need meat at all. By the way, a lot of traditions, for instance, in India are completely vegetarian or vegan, or giant traditions even eat, you know, any plant that brings life. So I think that it's very important to understand that we have human supremacy as accepted in many societies, and that has to change. Because in many societies at the moment, there are still sexist and racist and ethnocentrist and classist and you know, biases based on many different divisions. But many societies are aware of this. Many societies are working on this. Many societies are trying to be aware that sexism is not good, and ethnocentrism is not good, and caste is not good, and all these other things. But most societies at the moment are still taking human centrism for granted. We are not acknowledging the problem with human centrism, the problem with human exceptionalism. In order to feel dignity, we do not have to feel better than other beings. Actually, this is really bad for us, because, for instance, the Amazon forest is the lung of the planet Earth. We cut the forest, we have less oxygen for us, we are going to die because of health-related problems. So again, whole, again in English, come from Proto-Germanic, meaning whole, health, the health of everything connected. So very important, going back to your question, really understanding that the laws of knowledge that we have been granted, have been given from day one of our existence in these societies, brings human centrism. I am a mother of a young child. I see the books that she's given by family members and friends, which I really acknowledge for their generosity, but a lot of the books that are, you know, widespread for kids are human-centric, are, you know, like showing non-human animals as dressed as humans and doing what humans do, and it's completely wrong. We're not understanding non-humans that way with anthropocentrism, with anthropomorphing. We need to stop. We need to understand that we need to change the way we portray non-human animals, the way we deal with them. You know, people are using non-human animals for reasons that are really not about survival. So again, yes, Bapin, very important. It is time to address human exceptionalism with a kind but clear and strong commitment to change. This is not good for us as a species. This is not good for the planet. This is not good for the ontological unfolding. We need to change it right now.
Thank you, ma'am, for your response. Again, I am quoting from your wonderful book, Philosophical Posthumanism, that I would like to inform our participants that is available in Amazon. You can buy it. That is really a wonderful book. And I am quoting from that book, Philosophical Posthumanism by Fernando. I am quoting, posthumanism is a praxis as well as a philosophy of mediation, which manifests post-dualistic, post-centralizing, unquote. So my question to you is that how far have we become able to go beyond the notion of dualism? How can we deconstruct the very notion of dualism for the sake of post-dualistic world?
What a wonderful question, Bapin, and how wonderful also to talk about it with this incredible group of people. There are 120 of us, all people interested in posthumanism. Many of you actually are working on this. Now, in the field of posthumanism, a lot of attention has been given, for instance, to human diversity. The idea that we cannot jump to the future without realizing the issues that we had in human history. So if we are not going to address, for instance, racism and classism and caste and sexism, all this stuff, these problems are going to come with us to the future. So we should really address those issues right now. That's a post-humanist level of the discussion, and human diversity, acknowledging, respecting. The second layer also has been addressed. There is much more work that needs to be done about post-anthropocentrism, but there is a lot of people who are working on this. Definitely in the theory of posthumanism, we need much more people engaging with political issues, as we were mentioning, enough of human supremacy. That's not good. Now, the third layer is, as you rightly mentioned, is post-dualism. Now, I say post-dualism, and I don't say non-dualism, because again, I know that there are really incredible traditions that come, for instance, out of India about non-dualism, which I deeply respect. I think they really bring so much to the conversation, and we should really delve more into those. The reason why I don't say non-dual, but I say post-dual, is because I'm very aware that most societies, actually if not all societies at this point, are based on dualistic premises. Now, the form of the dual may be different. It may be Italians from the north versus Italian of the south. It can be Hindu versus Muslims. It can be female versus male. It can be white versus black. So the form of the strict dichotomy can be different from society to society. But the habit of dualizing the other in a rigid, absolute way at this point is a habit, if not, we could call it a disease of the human species. Of course, we're talking about a social disease, a mind disease, a consciousness disease of the species itself, which doesn't mean it applies to each individual, which doesn't mean it applies to the Homo sapiens as, maybe from other times and era, but at this point, this is an issue that we have as a species. Because in every society we go, we are going to see some type of discrimination. I can guarantee that. I've been traveling a lot in my life. I have friends and relatives all over the world. I do consider everyone in this planet as part of my family. And I see this issue in every single continent, in every single nation. There is always the other, the one who is being discriminated against, brutalized, etc., etc. So we have to acknowledge this. It's fine. We need to acknowledge that at this point, the human condition has a mental disorder. The mental disorder is this constant repetition of dichotomies that are creating the other. We need to acknowledge this. Once we acknowledge it, we can move on. Now, this is why I say post-dualism, because I'm aware that existence itself obviously is not dual. And again, Buddhist tradition and all the mystical tradition, from Sufism in Islam to Christianity to Hinduism, all of the traditions, when you go to the mystical side of it, all of them say, guess what? Existence is not dual. Once you are enlightened, you realize that. But to get to enlightenment, it might take, you can think of many lives or many stages in your life, many experiences. It's a long shot. So a lot of people are here and they really learn how to exist through social conditions. In the 21st century, we need to acknowledge that one of the habits that the human have developed, at least in the last, I would say, at least 3,000 years, probably much more than that, but at least 3,000 years. Some people say maybe since the Neolithic, so it would be 10,000 years, which is not much, because the humans have been around as a species from hundreds of thousands of years. Paleolithic time is much longer than all of this. But in the history of time, is not such a big frame, but in the history of consciousness, it becomes relevant. So if I started to be socialized in a society that teaches me from a very young age, actually until I'm not even born, are you female? Are you male? Should I give you a pink gift or a blue gift? Are you Hindu? Are you Muslim? Are you hetero? Are you gay? All these conditions, even before you're born, because at this point, people are told, the gender of the fetus when the child is still in the belly of the mother. And that's already started with the dualism. And people already started to gift, different gift if it's a female child or a male child. So we are being socialized in a dimension that has learned to dichotomize, to dualize. This has to be deconstructed at an ontological level, at a social-cultural level from all of us, because we are part of this. We have constructed this habit, which maybe at one point was good. Maybe at one point we needed to dualize. Maybe, it was us versus, the wolf who were going to eat us alive in the middle of the mountains at night. I mean, at one point, maybe this dualism served the human. But at this point, when we do have a lot of resources that we could feed everyone on planet Earth, when we have enough with everyone, and if we're not taking care of planet Earth, there is not going to be enough for anyone anyway. At this point, we need to realize that dichotomies are not serving the human species anymore. The dualizing is not helping us in any way. So in that sense, Bapin, going back to your question, I say post-dualism because it's a fact that historically the human has developed a habit, the habit of dualizing in rigid ways. This habit needs to be deconstructed at a social cultural level as a species right now. It's going to take time, but time is unlimited, so there's not an issue with that. And it's very urgent. But you're right, in the field of posthuman studies, this has been started to be addressed, but much more work needs to be done. So this is why also it's very exciting, and even more exciting, I think, really, the Indian tradition can bring a lot to the conversation in this, from this perspective. So again, of course, existence is non-dual, but because we socialize in historical, materialistic ways, which is not a negative, it's just the way we are, we need to acknowledge that society have been constructed and are constructed right now in dualistic ways. Think, for instance, of nationalism in India. Think of racism in North America. Think of sexism in many countries. We need to acknowledge that this way of socializing is no longer serving the human. Simple like that. Does no longer serve the human. So we're going to take a step back, stop and say, how can we do it? It should not be depressing, should be exciting. We are aware, we can see, and we can change.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this wonderful explanation. Now, I would like to know from you that why is the concept of rhizome relevant to philosophical posthumanism, or how this particular notion of rhizome is important for readdressing the very notion of anthropocentrism.
Rhizome you so much, Bapin, for your beautiful question. So again, if people in the audience are not from a philosophical tradition, let me just clarify what is the rhizome, which is a notion that has been very impactful in the tradition of postmodernism and also posthumanism. Now, it was developed in the 80s, so we're talking about the last century, in the 80s, by Deleuze and Guattari, who were two philosophers / psychoanalysts in the French tradition, very much also related to the 68 cultural movement of change in Paris. Now, the rhizome was considered a very powerful notion. What is the rhizome, first of all? The rhizome is an existential metaphor that comes, for instance, from the plant life. Think, for instance, of turmeric. Think of ginger. These are plants that can grow. If you cut a little piece of turmeric or ginger and you place it in the water first and then in the earth, they can grow. They are not dead. Now, it's different with a tree. If you cut a tree, the tree is not going to keep growing. It's going to die. The turmeric, you cut a little piece, it can grow. Deleuze and Guattari brought this metaphor as a metaphor of existence, but also a metaphor that was really useful in, for instance, the tradition of technology. Technology was developing. So, for instance, the way we surf the internet, it's considered a rhizomatic experience. Because I might go to Wikipedia to check what posthumanism means, and then I found a link about postmodernism, and I said, what is really postmodernism? And I go, click on postmodernism, and I find myself on another page. And then from postmodernism, I find a link to the rhizome. I said, what is the rhizome? Click on that, and boom, I find myself on another page with a wonderful vegan recipes about how to cook with turmeric. And then from there, I find myself on another website telling me what would be a good diet, whatever. That's a rhizomatic experience. It's not linear, because when I started my search on the internet with posthumanism, I had no idea that after 30 minutes, I was going to find myself on a page about vegan diet, for instance. Now, again, the rhizome has been a very useful notion to really rethink of everything from a non-hierarchical perspective. Why I say hierarchical? Because again, I don't fully agree with this, and I'm going to explain why. But according to Deleuze and Guattari, the rhizome is very powerful because it goes beyond the notion of the tree. They call it the arborescent tradition, which again grows in linear ways. So from the roots, goes through the trunk, and eventually to the leaves. It's a linear way of feeding. If you cut the trunk, if you cut the root, the tree is going to die. If you cut a piece of turmeric, you cut a piece of ginger, it's not going to die. It's going to generate in other ways. So in that sense, everything is generative. And also everything is regenerative. In that sense, you are going to have a notion that allows us to rethink of everything, society itself, in a non-hierarchical way. Again, let's locate this. This was the 80s. This was a huge cultural, real revolution in Paris, France, and all over the world, about people realizing that many things had to change right now. And again, think of all the tradition of feminism and critical race studies and the gay movement, like and all these people who had been discriminated against, brutalized historically, were bringing voices and say, enough. This idea of a way of understanding power is no longer the case. Foucault, macro and micro forms of power. Power is everywhere. Nietzsche, the will of power is everywhere. The rhizome, power is everywhere. Everything is generative. Your life matters. Of course, now we have a whole movement that is bringing something very important, Black Lives Matter, because, for instance, how Black people have been treated in the United States and brutalized and tortured and not being respected. So, in that sense, going back to the rhizome, you realize that power is not just hierarchical. It's not just people making laws in wherever, Calcutta or Rome or Washington, D.C. or whatever. Of course, there is that level that needs to be addressed, but that's the level of the micro physics of power. Again, power is everywhere. Politics as the personal is political. The rhizome as everything is generative. The way, for instance, we exist is generative. What are we bringing to existence with our thoughts, with our actions, with our reactions, with our, with our relations, with our intra-relations? So the rhizome brings a lot to the conversation. It allows to see us as rhizomes, us as generative in the sensitive, dynamic texture of space-time in which we are. So again, thank you so much for your question, Bapin. Definitely an important notion. On this side, I would also like to say that I'm not placing the rhizome as the contrast to the arborescent tradition, which is a little the case with Deleuze and Guattari. They say, oh, the tree is just the arborescent tradition, we move on with the rhizome. I find that the tree also is a very important notion that also brings understanding of some form of structures. Society does have structures. Of course, those structures are not eternal. They are changing. They're constantly changing. In the past, there were kings and queens, and now many countries do not have that anymore. So those form of macro systems are there, but they are also constantly changing, but they are not separated from the rhizomatic power of generative and regenerative element that we all are. So definitely an important, empowering notion for all of us right now.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for this beautiful explanation. And now I would like to go from this dualism to post-dualism, multiplicity. And for this, I would like to hand over this virtual space to Jayanta Kumar Nayak for continuing the question answer session. And we would like to take questions from the participants, and they can raise their question, their observation. So over to you, Jayanta.
Thank you, madam, for your wonderful explanation of the questions. Thank you, Bapin, for your wonderful questions. Now the floor is open for questions. Dear participant, you can ask question directly to Dr. Francisca Fernando. She is waiting for your questions. Please, so please ask your question directly.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
At first, madam, a very good morning to you. My name is Rahul Sarkar, a student of 4th SEM, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College, Department of English. Ma'am, in your book, you have mentioned that the relationship with transhumanism. So, my question is to you, how can you relate transhumanism with posthumanism?
Thank you so much, Raul, for this wonderful question. Yes, very, very important question. Okay, let me just clarify that not every post and transhumanist is so open about connecting these two philosophical movements, because you're very right, they are very different. So, for instance, I'm thinking at, for instance, the Italian posthumanist tradition. Many people based in southern part of Europe, they really make a point about separating themselves from transhumanism. When I started working in this, which was many years ago, at first I also had this dichotomic tendency of saying, okay, those transhumanists are just, technocentric fellows, and I'm not like that, and blah, blah, blah. Then, year after year, I started to meet all of the main philosophers of transhumanism. I started to engage with the community of transhumanism, and I realized that the transhumanist tradition brings a lot to be thought about. Now, I started to realize that, yes, there are deep differences. That's why I personally do not consider myself a transhumanist. I do consider myself a posthumanist. But I don't want to place this as a strong dichotomy in which they are the bad ones and I'm the good one. I'm saying this because after again years of studying, merging, learning, being in discussion with all the main philosophers of transhumanism, I realized that what they're bringing to the conversation is something very valuable to all of us. Is a exciting way to look at the human as a complete open notion in relation to what is happening right now and what could speculatively happen in the close and in the far future. Let me explain this. So the transhumanists are very excited about, for instance, embracing technology. They think the technology can really transform the human condition, to the point, as I was mentioning before, some people, all transhumanists are saying, well, we're not posthuman yet. Some of us may become. So according to them, more of a linear notion of time. We used to be human. Some of us are transhuman now in the way we embrace technology. And some may become posthuman with, for instance, different examples, mind uploading, posthuman type of species on Mars, etc., etc. Now, I realized that that discussion has some real value in the sense that, for me, we need to acknowledge technology as a way that is manifesting, as a way of revealing, to go back to another continental philosopher, Heidegger, technology as a way of revealing. So technology is not just something we are using, it's something that is manifesting in the ontological realm and is changing who we are and the way the planet is. Think of, for instance, satellites on space. They are literally, materially changing the cosmos. Think about the debris around us as well. It's not just, positive or negative. Let's take everything into consideration. Space debris is changing materially the space around planet Earth. Now, we need to acknowledge this. So we cannot just rely on the Upanishads. We cannot just rely on the Quran. We cannot just rely on the Bible. We cannot just rely on the figurines of the Paleolithic. All these forms of wisdom that have been given to us by people who came before us are incredible sources. We should always go back to them and learn from them. But we also need to acknowledge that our condition is unique. In that sense, we need to be brave enough to look at it. Now, the limits of transhumanism, of course, is just the excitement. What I was mentioning before is the exotic excitement. They say, oh, too bad with the past, too bad with racism. Let's just jump to the future and embrace technology. It's not enough. Because if we're going to do that, we're going to see other types of discriminations reflected in the future. If we do not address, for instance, dichotomic dualism and discrimination right now, maybe tomorrow is not going to be racism against non-whites or women, but it's going to be maybe racism against humans in a hypothetical scenario of AI taking over, or racism against robots, discrimination against robots. I mean, if we do not address the issue of the absolute other, as we were mentioning before, we are going to see the same issues again and again. Now it can be genetic discrimination, Gattaca movie, brilliant. Or it could be, biocentric discrimination. Now the bad ones are the robots because they're not biological, and so on. Enough of that. That is not helpful. So in that sense, going back to your important question, Raul, after years of really rethinking of the human condition, I realized that transhumanism brings a great gift. The gift of being able to acknowledge technology as part of the onto-realm, of the ontological manifestation. Yes, it's happening. We need to acknowledge that. Now, it's just great? No, it's not. That's the issue with transhumanism. They are pretty much techno-utopian. Everything is going to be solved by technology and science. Most of them are atheists, so they say, okay, we don't have God anymore, now we have technology. That's not enough for me. That's not a good replacement. That's not the kind of narrative I want to sustain. So going back to you, yes, you're right. Some people do not, they're just transhumanists or they're just posthumanists. In my research, I realized that we are in the posthuman era. Being in the posthuman era means that there are going to be a lot of voices reflecting on this. Many voices bringing different insights. All of them are precious. Of course, you need to locate yourself. What are you seeing? Because what you are seeing is going to be precious to all of us, and only you can see that. And you need to share that. So in that sense, I personally don't find my voice explained to transhumanism. That's why I had to develop my own take on philosophical posthumanism. But I also want to acknowledge transhumanism and the beautiful work they do about envisioning, merging, seeing the possible potentials of emerging and speculative technologies, because that's not the future, it's already happening. Some people think that genetic engineering is the future. It has already happened. 2017, big news around the world of the first humans who were genetically engineered, if they are the first humans. The first humans who were defined as genetically engineered, Nana and Lulu, controversy in China. So we cannot think of these issues as, oh, it's never going to happen. Is science fiction? Is not science fiction. Is happening. So we need to acknowledge that without fear or without excitement, maybe going into the non-attachment of many beautiful traditions coming out of India, trying to see without being just excited about it or without just being scared about it, but being able to see. In that sense, transhumanists allow us to be able to realize that technology is here. We need to address that, and we need to, I would say, try not to dichotomize the other. So again, I would always, all the events I create, all the things that I write, I always try to acknowledge all the groups, because the power is in the plurilogue, in the vision of many. The truth is not just in the hand of one person, because we are all manifesting here. And so we should always be able to hear others and see the beauty in others, and also being able to generatively and kindly critique also what others are not saying. Say, okay, that's great, but you're not seeing this. And we can together grow, and we can together change, and we can together do it. So thank you so much, Raul.
Thank you, madam, for your kind explanation. Anyone do you have any questions? Please ask directly to the ma'am.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello. Yes, ma'am. This is Shoykot Chakraborty, MPhil scholar in Kazi Nazrul University. Currently, I'm also working on my dissertation in this zone of post-humanism. So I was pretty much engaged in this lecture. I have two little observations that I would like to know from you. how much do you consider medical humanities to be related with this idea of posthumanism? And another one is, do you feel that posthuman society is going to be the ultimatum of this idea of cosmopolitan?
Thank you so much for your wonderful question. I'm going to start with the first one, and then I'm going to the second one. Is the second one, you were asking about medical humanities, is that right? I just want to make sure that I got it right.
Yes, medical humanities.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, yeah, let's address them in conjunction. So I have, of course, some issues with, the idea of a, globalized world, because often that means just a new type of supremacy. The new big corporations coming to the micro societies, and it's a form of colonization. And again, India is a great tradition of post-colonial studies. So I think that with this new globalized world, that was, the epoch of, the terminology of the 90s, it was supposed to be, something that we should be all excited about. I had my doubts about it. That's why at first I stopped doing that, just because it created confusion. But at first I was not really talking about global. I was talking about going local, which is a term that is quite common in the European tradition, for instance, less common in other areas of the world. That's why I stopped using that. But I like the power of the local, because it really underlines the fact that global doesn't mean just a new supremacy. Now it's an economic supremacy or a cultural supremacy. Now, for instance, we can just wipe out other cultures because of the power of social media enforcing new cultural stereotypes, or the power of economy. Now big companies are going to other countries or other societies enforcing, their products. And for instance, I like in India, an interesting tradition against, for instance, GMOs and all what has been done, for instance, with Vandana Shiva. It's a very great example of going local, bringing a local experience that can be useful to everyone. You don't need just to accept the global because it's good. GMOs may not be good at all. So with the global, I think that there is the issue of cultural domination. Currently, it's been, for instance, the case of American domination. It can be very soon some other type of domination, Chinese domination, or Indian domination, or whatever domination. I think, again, so the global is some shadow that we need to realize. So going just global, for me, was problematic. That's why, again, in my first years of writing, I would always use the term local to really underline that we cannot just global. We cannot just go global, meaning, okay, now we have just accept a new global power or a new global government or a new global culture. I think that it's always very important to keep in mind the plurality. Going into ontological terms, monism and pluralism are always co-emerging. So that the one and the many are always co-emerging. We cannot just go for the new cultural paradigm. In that sense, I would really be critical of global. On the other side, of course, after you become part of the globe, also thanks to technology. Think of this beautiful meeting right now. We are located in all different places, and we can talk together, and we can grow together, and we can share insights together, and we can change the manifestation of the ontological realm together. So it's also global. And I stopped using local just because outside of the European tradition, many people would get confused, and Google would get confused and think there was like a spelling mistake. So I use global, but being very aware of the fact that I'm not embracing this approach of, okay, now we're all one. We have never been a one. We are not one right now. I'm not one. Again, biota in my guts, who I was yesterday, who I'm going to become today. I'm breathing air to survive, so I'm already not one because I need air. If I stop breathing, I'm going to die. So this idea of global, if it is based on a critical approach, generative critical, and not just the academic tradition in which I just need to be critical to show that I'm intelligent. That's not an intelligence. That's, again, also a form of becoming a disease, just criticizing others for the sake of it. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about always being able to see, always being able to realize where we're at and see what we're missing. So in that sense, global, from the globe, yes, we are on a globe, we are part of a globe. In the future, we may be part of different globes. We may also be part of Mars and other planets. But we are part of the globe. In that sense, yes. But in that universalizing way, okay, now we're all one, no. That neo-humanist approach, no. That, bringing one form of human identity good for everyone, no. Bringing cultural domination, no. Because it's not good. Because it gives us wrong messages. Because it doesn't allow us, in the short time that we're on this earth, to really understand who we are in the big sense, not just Hindu, Muslim, Italian, American, female, male, trans, hetero, not in that sense. Those are historical construction. Fine, play with those, but they are historical construction. As in the ontological material sense, material not or just matter. Matter is dynamic, is fluctuating, is changing, is vibrating, is the on. So in that sense, everything is open, everything is related, everything is intra-related. So in that sense, about the medical humanity, is a very interesting question. I think that some people who come from humanities are afraid of opening the humanity to connect and merge with other disciplines. For instance, computer studies and AI and the medical humanities, environmental humanities. As a post-humanist, I see that that's probably the only way, which doesn't mean getting rid of the humanities, because we need to always be able to locate our tradition, understanding where we come from. We cannot forget our, for instance, dualistic past, and also non-dualistic ones. We need to be constantly embracing who we were in the past, who we are, in order to envision who we want to be. Who do we really want to be? So in that sense, the medical humanities are interesting. So for me, it's very important always to be, as a posthumanist, not just addressing the humanistic tradition. In my writings, you mentioned my book, I do work with quantum physics and engineering, study of engineering, and the medical humanities, etc., because it's very important to understand we cannot just close ourselves in a strict discipline to have this strong identity as a philosopher. A philosopher is someone who should be loving wisdom. Wisdom is everywhere. Knowledge is everywhere. And knowledge comes from all these different fields. So I think that it's very important for the humanities not to be closing themselves in the close, strict identity, but being able to be in dialogues with all the other disciplines. And doing that, maintaining the relevance of the humanities. I'm not saying wiping out the humanities, which is also a risk, which is happening. Oh, let's just get rid of the humanities. No, we need to be engaged with those traditions, but in an open ways. Having very important, these departments that have a core of people coming from different perspectives, different disciplines, in dialogue with each other. This is the ancient rishis, this is being able to understand. And this is, all the traditions in the end come to this formula, is know yourself. And to know yourself, we need to look deeply into us as individuals, as a species, as a society, as a planet, and more.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Shoikat, for asking the question. Any other questions? Please ask directly, madam.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Ma'am, according to Donna Haraway, the post-humanist critic, the cyborg is supposed to obliterate gender dichotomies. However, in series like The Incredible Hulk and then the Papa Girls and so on and so forth, we see that even the cyborgs are very much deeply rooted into gender roles. Would you like to comment on that?
Thank you so much. You're bringing a great topic to the discussion. Yes, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it because philosophically speaking, posthumanism, we mentioned postmodernism, but it's definitely a philosophical approach that comes out of also cyborg studies, specifically cyborg feminism was deeply influential. For instance, Donna Haraway wrote a manifesto for cyborgs in 1985/1996, which really brought us a new understanding of who we were as a society. Now, let's go a little bit deeper into this, because maybe not everyone in the audience is know Donna Haraway. Maybe not everyone knows the Manifesto for Cyborg. So what happened is that she was writing this short text, it's pretty short, for a specific audience, which was a socialist, feminist audience. Specifically for this specific audience. She had no idea that the manifesto was going to become such a wide reference for decades, to the point of becoming a cultural reference. If you look, if you watch Ghost in the Shell, which is a very famous AI animation movie, you see Donna Haraway as a character. So she really became part of the culture in big ways, in big waves. She had no idea. Actually, the manifesto itself was rejected from the journal a couple of times. So she was thinking a very specific audience, which at the time was very essentialist. For instance, at the time, feminism was saying enough of patriarchy. Let's go just back to nature. Technology has been developed by patriarchy to create a domain, a control over women. A lot of movements were saying that. Think also, for instance, the hippie movements back in the 70s. Let's just go back to nature and let's go back to a relation with Mother Earth. Now, Donna Haraway said something completely different. She said, we are hybrids. Ontology itself is hybrid. We are already cyborgs. It's not a matter of adopting or not technology. We are already cyborgs in the 21st century. And of course, in the 20th century, and that, of course, can be expanded not just to the historical era, but technology in the wide sense. Because, for instance, the use of fire is considered one of the first form of technology, and this is also how the human eventually became one of the main species on planet Earth who is not at risk of extinction, is technology. Paleontology describes the human as that animal who creates tools out of tools. Again, it's a technological definition of the human. So Donna Haraway in the 80s says, okay, enough of essentialism. We cannot just go back to nature. We are technological beings. We are cyborgs. And she pushed it for a feminist audience, say, the cyborg is post-gender. Of course, that was in the 80s. A lot of people have realized quite soon after cyborg that was not the case at all. For instance, nowadays, many examples we can bring of sexism and racism in technology. Even algorithms are portraying, keep on with stereotypes of based on gender and race that, of course, were created by humans creating these algorithms. So, yeah, sex and is not out of the picture at all. The cyber is not just post-gender. But I think that the message of her manifesto is still very actual, although it's not the final answer. I always like to bring Haraway in conjunction with Vandana Shiva, because at the same time that Haraway was underlined as a cyborg, Vandana Shiva was saying something different. Say, well, you talk about cyborgs, but if everything is just hybrid, everything is just a cyborg, then, for instance, GMOs are completely fine. What is wrong with that? We are just shuffling around what is already in nature. So she said it's very important to realize that this is a human-centric narrative. Even the narrative of the cyborg is human-centric. Vandana Shiva, 1992, already saying this in a beautiful book that she edited, Biopolitics. So when I bring Haraway, I always bring in conjunction with Vandana Shiva, because Vandana Shiva was the one who brought strong criticism, which was generative and kind. She definitely deeply merged with Haraway, but also from a critical perspective. It's not enough to say that we are just cyborg. It's not enough to say that we are post-gender. But we need to acknowledge the cyborg in a way that it's really underlining, that it's really deconstructing identity. And in this sense, I like a quote from the manifesto, Cyborg Manifesto, in which she asking, do we need identity? Well, she's not saying these terms, but she's talking, do we need identity, or can we work with affinity, for instance? Affinity, she brings the example, for instance, of feminism and women of colors in the way that that is creating affinities instead of strict dichotomy. So the idea is that the cyborg is a good metaphor, is not the ultimate metaphor, is not the final answer, but it is a good metaphor to ask deep questions about who we are. And I think a big question that it's really still relevant, more than 20 years later, is, do we need identity? Of course, it's a big question also in the United States, where identity politics is also very important, considering, you know, the racist, sexist history of politics here. So it's very important to say, no, I've been discriminated because I am black. I've been discriminated because I am gay. I've been discriminated because I am woman, etc., etc. But the question is, in the big picture of not just reforming society, but re-envisioning society, can we play with other tools? Is affinity bringing some interesting way to reconceptualizing our social connection as social animals? Because we also are. We are not just individuals. We also are part of a species. Even the people meditating all their life in a cave, which is wonderful, they bring changes of waves into consciousness, but even they're bringing wave of consciousness, a change of consciousness to also specific type of consciousness, which is human consciousness. So wherever you are, no matter if you are in the Himalaya or in the center of your city, you are an individual, you are part of a species, and you're also part of the planet, and so more. So again, thank you so much for your question.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions? If you have
Yes,
any other questions, okay.
Hello?
Please ask, madam.
Hello?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question. I'm Priyanka. I have a question. Is spirituality and transcendence that we seek in religion even valid in the post-human perspective?
What a wonderful question, Priyanka. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
I would say that the answer per se, it would say yes, absolutely yes. But of course, actually, I should not say absolutely. It's a yes, but of course, it depends how you're going to embrace that. Now, if religion is a tool that is helping you to really connect you to the transcendental experience of existing, because existing itself is transcendental. Think, for instance, of when we are dreaming and we think so much we are part of the dream, and boom, we wake up and that dream is gone and we're part of a different reality. All that is part of the transcendental experience, because transcend, for instance, our experience right now, for instance, in this conversation, in this society, etc., etc. So existence itself, existing itself, is a transcendental experience. Now, if religion is helping you accessing that level of understanding, wonderful. But if religion is giving you another strong identity to hold on, another strong identity to recognize yourself outside of yourself, now you are real Hindu, now you are real Christian, now you are real Muslim, that's not helping in any way, because it's creating another cage around yourself that doesn't allow you to look at the sky. So if religion, it allows you to open all the windows of this cage that is constructed around you in society, and realizing that, yes, you're playing with this window. Yes, you can say you're Hindu, you're Muslim, you're female, you're male. You're playing with this identity, and they help you maybe learning more about yourself. Great. But if religion becomes your new cage in which you recognize yourself outside of yourself, you recognize yourself in that identity, that's not in any way helpful. And this goes with anything. If now, I'm telling, now I'm posthuman, and now posthumanism is all I can do because only posthumanism can help me enlightening, that's not helping me in any way. So in that sense, I would say always address these are just tools to really being able to see the sky that we are. So in that sense, I wrote, for instance, an article, it's freely available on my academia profile. We've always been posthuman, a spiritual genealogy of the posthuman. Is in the sense that, for instance, spirituality, all the mystic tradition transcendental tradition in any religion, of course can help, because it really allows you to see yourself beyond the human construction, because being human also becomes a social construction. Becoming human. What does it mean to be human? And you're told that you are not a dog, you are not a cat, you're not these other animals. And then become more and more refined. Oh, but you're not just a human. You are female, and you are Dalit, and you are a Hindu, and you are Christian, and you are American, and you are Republican. And you can add layers until you die. And you don't. And that's not going to really help you much in any way. So again, thank you so much, Priyanka, for your question. If religion, it's allowing you to deconstruct all these strong constructions around you, go for it. And that, for instance, is the case in many cases. Many humans that have been not recognized in their existential dignity. Think of the history of slavery. Many slaves, for instance, use religions in a way to reconnect to the existential picture. They were considered goods. They were considered property of others. They've been brutalized, killed, raped. The only way that they could say, well, I'm not just the slave of this person. I cannot be just brutalized and raped, because I am everything. And in that sense, if religion is helping you in this understanding, wonderful. But again, if religion becomes your new strong identity that you need to look at to see who you are, to see the reflection of religion yourself, then it's not in any way helpful.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, madam, for your explanation. Ma'am, there is a question in the chat box from Navnita Karanjai. My question to Dr. Fernando regarding the internet being a isometric experience, what is the nature of subjectivity in the digital age? Ma'am, if you answer this question.
Thank you so much. The question is, what is the nature of subjectivity in the digital age? Is it right, connected to the internet? Is that correct?
Okay.
Yes. So that's a great question. That's really related to the point of being brave, to the point of not just relying on other people's wisdom. Again, always be grateful to anyone who is willing to share their wisdom with you. Again, maybe the rishis from the Upanishads, maybe the Sufi mystics from the Islamic tradition, maybe your parents, your grandparents, your daughter, your son, whoever it is. Always be grateful. But we need to also be brave enough to locate ourselves in our existential unfolding. In this sense, for instance, for many of us, not for all of us, some people don't use the internet, some people don't have any technical devices, absolutely fine as well. But in the 21st century, a lot of humans, I think at the point, the percentage is, I think, at least 1/3 of the humans are deeply connected with technology, to the point that is not just a connection, is an intra-relation. Technology and us are co-emerging, changing each other, the way we think of ourselves. Think, for instance, of how an email can change your day. You get up and you check your email, all of a sudden you are so happy because maybe you got to the position that you were looking forward to. Or maybe you're so sad because someone that you really care about is not feeling well. Or think, for instance, how you may watch a documentary on YouTube, and that is going to really help us understanding much deeper a question that you had that you could not really answer. Or think of this community right now that is literally available thanks to the digital realm. We are connecting, really re-envisioning together, in this together, because of the existential manifestation of technology, because of satellites on outside of planet Earth. So in that sense, I would say, if you don't mind, if everyone else, the microphones, I can, Papi, do you mind muting everyone, and I'm going to unmute myself, because there is, I hear some sounds. Papi, do you mind muting everyone, because I have...
Please, all of you, mute your microphone, please. Please, all of you, mute your microphone.
You can, Papi, you can also mute everyone if you, oh, perfect. Thank you so much. It was just hard to speak.
Okay. Please continue, ma'am.
Yeah, so I just want to say that, so going back to your question is, so the digital realm, it's an essential aspect that we need to consider. Now, of course, the point is, what about subjectivity? is subjectivity even something that is still useful as a notion? So if we look, for instance, at the liberal notion of the subject is separation from others, in this absolute notion of freedom, which was not based on any relation, that is outdated. That is the narrative of the Enlightenment, which has to be addressed as outdated. We can no longer go with, I'm talking about the European Enlightenment, not talking about Buddhist Enlightenment or moksha or anything like that. I'm talking about the European Enlightenment based on this notion of an autonomous subject. A subject could be free from any relation and be happy in its complete autonomy. Absolutely wrong. Because, for instance, again, I cannot be completely autonomous. I need air to breathe, and I need food to eat, and I need others to even manifest in this dimension, because without parents or without biological material, I cannot even exist. So this idea of us just as in complete separation, in complete autonomy, is outdated. That's no longer suit us. Now, so if you go into the tradition of the subject, no. Other philosophers, for instance, Rosi Bredotti, she thinks she revised the notion of subjectivity in a transversal way through the Deleuze and Guattari, the rhizome, and she thinks, well, we can only think of us as subjectivities, relational subjectivity, transversal subjectivity to planet Earth, etc., etc., the digital realm, etc., etc. I would go a little further, asking if we even need the notion of subjectivity, or if we can be creative and think of other terms, other notions that don't come with this dualistic history. Maybe the history of the self, again, based on the Upanishads in which the self is Brahman, maybe that could be an interesting notion to address instead of the subject. So I'm just saying that I'm a little more critical of the notion of subjectivity. I know that other philosophers, colleagues, incredible thinkers like Rosi, they're less critical of that. I mean, they're critical, but they feel comfortable with it. And I do appreciate and I do use the notion of subjectivity, for instance, through Rosi Bredotti approach. She's an incredible thinker, bringing so much to the conversation. But personally, in my writing, I always feel a little awkward about using this notion. So to finalize my answer to you, absolutely, the internet, digital, the technological, we need to address that if we are merged with that. If we come from a specific tradition that is not using technology, we might not want to, and it's also fine. But if we are manifesting through technology, it's important to see this. It's not just saying, okay, this is not happening, and we can just think of, like nature as non-technological. Nature is technological. This computer is made with elements that come from nature, with minerals that are extracted out of mines, for instance, in Congo. So, I mean, that's we need to address. But again, the notion of subjectivity, I'm personally I have some hard time using it. But again, if you feel comfortable with using it, absolutely fine. I would probably just go with maybe a Rosi Bredotti approach to subjectivity and that tradition.
Thank you, madam, for your wonderful explanation. Ma'am, there is a question in the chat box. You are talking about AI and mind uploading. What do you think about bioethics, especially after the pandemic, in context to artificial intelligence, where necropolitics is playing a crucial role in our post-human world?
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful question. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The COVID-19 and post-COVID, well, we're not into post-COVID yet, but the COVID-19 outbreak really allowed us to see in so many different ways and so many deeper ways about everything. So, for instance, what I would call a kind of naive and techno-utopian approach to technology, which was the case of transhumanism, which with the idea of just, technology bringing more progress to humankind without really realizing that that's never been the case. Because even the progress brought by the Enlightenment, by European Enlightenment in the 18th century brought ecological disaster to the point that, for instance, Crutzen and Stormer locate the outset of the Anthropocene in the specific industrial revolution, which was also the era of the Enlightenment narrative, again, European Enlightenment narrative. So in that sense, with COVID-19, we really see, obviously, what technology is. Technology is many things. is not just something that, as some transhumanists were claiming, is going to bring more progress and more good to humankind, when first of all, this humankind has been generalized because many people don't even have access to food. So I don't know which kind of humankind we're talking about. And second, progress doesn't just come as something that is universally good. Again, Industrial Revolution, some progress brought to some humans brought a complete ecological devastation to the planet. So in that sense, I think transhumanism really need to now being able to relocate their narrative about bioethics, about technology, about emerging and speculative ways to go about it. So I don't know if that's going to be the case, because it is very much at the core of transhumanism, locating themselves in this specific tradition. And now the answer from some transhumanists is actually, oh, you know what? Great, let's embrace even more technology. Let's, for instance, go into more of online teaching, which is a good option, but maybe it's not good for everyone. And I'm thinking, for instance, of many cases of people for which this shift to online teaching has been actually tragic. Think Devika, the Dalit girl who suicided herself in India because she didn't have access to online teaching. So it's not as simple as like, okay, now, with COVID, perfect. We just transit everything to technology, not a big deal, actually exciting. That's really simplistic. And again, based on a hierarchical notion of the human, and also on a supremacist approach, because also more satellite on space is going to bring more ecological damage and more space debris. So, of course, it always means the mediation. I call posthumanism as a philosophy of mediation, means always to be able to mediate all these aspects, because the answer is just not, yes or no. The answer is never just yes or no. Of course, if you're in the middle of a pandemic, if you can provide online teaching, if you do with the all right steps, make sure that someone like Devika, who didn't have access to technology, could maybe have access to a center where they were working on it, where she could have gone to have online classes. So again, without rushing into the new paradigm in which, just technology is the answer to everything, which has been the transhumanist approach, I think we also need to, of course, be also grateful. In my case, I was teaching physical classes until COVID took by storm New York really deeply in March. And I'm very grateful to the fact that we were able to actually be able to move to online teaching. And actually I was also grateful that all my students could connect with some difficulties. A lot of them had to go back to their countries and, they had quarantine. So a lot of people had to miss some classes, but it was okay. We were creative about it. We recorded some online classes, etc., etc. So the philosophy of mediation it comes when you cannot just take one perspective. You cannot just say, okay, you know what, we have COVID, boom, let's go into online teaching, everyone can do it. Or cannot just be, okay, because some people cannot have access to online, we just, have no online teaching for no one. It has to be going to mediated ways. Let's use this opportunity that is there for all of us, not for us, making sure that all of us can access. So as a school, before you go into online school teaching, you have to make sure that all your students can have access. And if that's not the case, you have to provide the tools before starting your classes to avoid the tragedy like Devika, who was such a good student, who felt so compelled to learning that she could not take the idea of not being part of this community, no longer part of this community of learning. So we really cannot forget people like Devika. And these are precious human beings who are gone because some other humans were not sensitive enough. So again, going back to your question, though COVID-19 is really pushing us also in clear ways not to be able to see technologies just as something that we can use, just as, live forever and, technology in situated, embodied ways of humans as a plurality working with these has to be a mediated approach in which, yes, we're acknowledging these tools, and we're not just going to, boom, shift to these tools because now, that's all we can do. We need to be wise, and to be wise means to be acknowledging where we come from, who we are, and where we want to go. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, madam. I think the question and answers should be over because it is already 2 hours. You have told so many questions and so many perspectives. So, Professor Sukhantu Das, May I ask some questions?
Yes, can I ask this question because we are far past behind the time schedule. Just a small question.
Okay.
Yes, my question. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Dr. Francisco Ferrando, for your insightful lecture. So my question is: do you think that Peter Sloterdijk's, idea of ontological constitution could be useful to postmodernist thinking, since it aspires to embrace the monstrosity of the external?
Thank you so much for your question. I think that for me something very important that came a little bit in our discussion is seeing posthumanism not only as the what, but also as the how. With Sloterdijk, I find that his approach is very much rooted in the academic tradition of philosophy, which again can be very useful for some people. So again, if you are thinking of posthumanism as a scholarly approach that you want to work with, yes, I would say definitely look into his work. He can bring a lot to the conversation in many different ways, in a generative ways, ways to connect, and also in a critical ways you do not want to connect. But I think that what I'm developing, especially after COVID-19, in which for me was really an awakening, or maybe a remembering. I started in this field precisely because I wanted to learn more about existence myself. I never saw philosophy just as a job, just as an academic tradition, which can be done. Again, in the Western tradition, a lot of people are just philosophers. I think, for instance, back to the Romans, I would say, again, with the microphones, I think that there are some microphones unmuted. If you don't mind, mute everyone, just for the sake of the sound. Bapin, if you don't mind just muting.
Please, everyone, mute your mic, please.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's just hard. We're really realizing that we are more than just us with all the sounds, but it's good to also focus. All right. So I was saying that, so if you're going into posthumanism as a philosophical tradition, academic tradition, I think his work can be very useful. Now, if you go into posthumanism as an existential approach that helps you realizing that the what is the how. So what we write should also address the way we interact with others and in the way we engage with our life, then I think that his approach is not very helpful. I think his approach is very much based on the tradition of, the critical tradition, which is good, but sometimes the critical tradition, it also pushes you in a kind of a power ego trip, in which sometimes it becomes more about you as a person, you as your own personal power, you as your own philosopher, as recognized in the field of philosophy, instead of what are you giving to existence. How is your approach helping existence manifest in ways that are ways that you want to see? So in that sense, I find that his approach is also based on, kind of the way of recognizing the self as maybe more important than what you're bringing to society. And with COVID-19, I had to really ask my question for myself. Is my work important just about, how many quotes you get or where you work or, like how much people recognize you? Or is my work really helping society to change? So I find, again, I don't engage too much with his work, although I do appreciate it on an intellectual level. But I personally find that it's also based on the tradition of the white male Western philosopher, who is also a little bit caught in the game of the ego, when sometimes it's also become about, him as a philosopher and not about his philosophy as the love for wisdom. So in my philosophical path, I like to engage also with philosophers that are bringing change to the way I exist. So that's why I very much like to connect with many traditions that comes out of this ego approach of, recognizing, the philosopher who come from a specific white, male, heterosexual, etc., tradition. So again, I would say, do feel free to engage with his work if it's bringing insights to you as a scholar, as an existential being. Also, don't ever forget to be honest to yourself. And if someone is very well known and very quoted and doesn't bring anything to you, You still need to know their work, but you do not necessarily need to engage with their work.
Thank you, Madam. Madam, I think the last question from Ms. Dr. Shruti Das. She will ask you directly. Dr. Shruti Das, could you please ask your question? Ma'am, please ask your question. Dr. Shruti Das. Ma'am, please ask your question. And your question is the last question. Madam, are you listening, Dr. Shruti Das? I think she's not listening. Dr. Shruti Das, are you listening?
Dr. Shruti Das, you are not audible. Please turn on your audio.
Please, Madam, turn on your audio. Because we are already running out of time. So please. Dr. Shruti Das. Ma'am, I think there is a problem of connection. We are already running out of time. So I would like to thank Dr. Fernando for our wonderful lectures and wonderful explanations. The session was for wonderful 1 hour, but it already crossed 2 hours. So we are very much enjoyed it, and now it's time to conclude. I think I'm going to hand over it to Mr. Bapin Mollik to deliver vote of thanks. Thank you, Madam. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayanta. Being the convener of the international webinar Post-Covid-19 Environmentalism, organized by the Department of English, Department of Political Science, and Internal Quality Assurance Cell, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College, West Bengal, India, it is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks. I express my heartiest thanks to Dr. Francisco Fernando, Adjunct Assistant Professor, New York University, and the philosopher of posthuman for accepting our invitation and to grace the occasion. And I also would like to thank Professor Nirmal Silvamuni, who is an eminent eco-critic of India, and he is the former head Department of English Studies, Central University of Tamil Nadu. And at the same time, I would like to thank Dr. Shruti Das, Head PG Department of English, Baharampur University, for gracing this occasion. And at the same time, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Mustafizur Rahman, Assistant Professor and Chairman, Department of Folklore Studies, Islamic University, Bangladesh. And I also would like to thank Dr. Shubhadeep Paul, Assistant Professor, Department of English and Cultural Studies, Bankura University, West Bengal, India. And of course, I also would like to thank Dr. Sudev Pratim Bosu, Associate Professor of English, Vishwabharati, Shantiniketan, India. And at the same time, I would like to thank Mr. Shukhendu Das, Assistant Professor, Department of English and Cultural Studies, Bankura University, West Bengal. And I also would like to thank our participants and their interest. And their interest is very crucial for organizing this kind of events. And at the same time, I would like to thank Google for creating this platform for organizing this kind of academic activities. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for showing interest to this webinar. And thank you, ma'am, for gracing this occasion. Thank you so much.
I would like, Bapin, to thank you so much for organizing this wonderful, wonderful conversation. Jayanta, University of Kalyani, all the people who participated in the conversation, who listened, to ask questions. And I would like to tell you one more time, we are in this together. We are part of a wave of change. Your presence and your insights are so precious, so precious. So this is not just something that you're writing about. This is not just academia. It's really a way of re-envisioning the human condition, or reaccessing us as the self, as connected and still diverse and still manifesting and unfolding. So thank you so much, all of you. I really, really appreciate all your presence and your work and your vision, and I feel so honored and blissful to have this community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Bapin, thank you.
We just want to say that yes, the Google form link regarding the feedback will be mailed to your mail ID, and at the same time we will upload the same to our official website www.dbrag.ac.in. Just fill up the feedback form, and on the basis of the feedback form we will certify you, and we will do it through alphabetically from A, B, C, D. So you will not get the certificate on a particular day. Rather, it will be sent partially. As you know that we cannot send certificates, more than 100 certificates cannot be issued on a single day. So you needed to worry about that. We will certify you, and at the same time, thank you once again for showing your interest and showing your patience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention, everyone, if you would like to be connected, we have a platform called PostHumans.org, which is the global posthuman network. If you have some insights that you'd like to share about COVID-19 and the posthuman, we have a blog. You can send us your blog entry. I also have a personal website, theposthuman.org, if you would like to be connected with us. Facebook page. So let's keep working together, envisioning. And again, thanks again so much, Bapin, Jayanta, University of Kalyani, India, and the Cosmos, and everyone for being part of this web. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, thank you, dear participants.